Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the latest MRP poll to drop, which would suggest that some senior Tories in very safe seats are there for the taking, which includes Kemi Badenoch. If this poll is correct, but that is a huge if, could present another Portillo moment opportunity. But can we take the results seriously? Well, before I get on to what I think of the polling itself, the big result suggested, if you do take it seriously, is that Kemi Badenoch could be beaten. She's a serious contender for leading the Conservatives after the election. You would expect that even if she didn't win the leadership contest, she'd be influential within the parliamentary party. As such, qualifies as a potential Portillo moment if she can be beaten. The fact that she's a fully committed culture warrior also would help crystallise the tactical vote, but that is a double-edged sword because it works both ways. Because Reform UK supporters would arguably be more likely to vote Conservative there to protect her than a One Nation Tory, for example. But Progressive voters may also be more likely to turn out to stop her as well. And this poll suggests that tactical voting from Reform UK supporters has the most muscle. But this is the first poll to show Badenoch as being particularly vulnerable. In previous polls, Kemi Badenoch has benefited from two cushions. First, she represents a traditionally rock-solid Conservative bastion. How does that help? It means that progressive voters who would absolutely vote against the Conservatives tend to become apathetic. What's the point of voting? The Tories will always win. You put a blue rosette on a pig and people will vote for the pig. That line of thinking. And there have been places in the past where that is the case. If people feel, however, that their rock-solid MP actually is vulnerable in a particular election, then maybe those people will go, oh, actually, my vote can count this time. I will go out and use my vote. Secondly, previous polls have made it unclear as to whether your tactical vote should go on to Labour or the Lib Dems. Who would be the best one to use your tactical vote for? And this poll aside, all the rest of the evidence, both from the other MRP polls and local election voting behaviour, makes it a tough one to call. The uncertainty splits the tactical vote and Badenoch wins. That's why seats like this are safer than those where the tactical vote is more obvious, but the Tory has a more comfortable margin. Safe Tories can be beaten. There is no safe seat this year, but it requires those twin conditions. It can't be just one of them. It has to be both of them, of voters believing that actually they have a chance this year, so they actually turn out, but also knowing where the tactical vote needs to go. This analysis shows that the contest is between the Conservatives and Labour, and it shows that it's really clearly between Labour and the Conservatives. More than that Labour could actually win without a lot of that Reform UK tactical voting. But, and the local Labour group are all over it, by the way, but can we take it seriously? The poll has attracted criticism. Like, I saw the headline results flash up last night. I didn't have time to look at it properly until this morning. The results were very odd, to say the least. They've presented two sets of breakdown results, one with and one without tactical voting. Obviously, one with tactical voting is extra difficult to model that on as well. The one without tactical voting shows a huge Labour seats haul, nothing particularly impressive for the Lib Dems, which I was a little bit sceptical about. The much higher than other polls are predicting haul of seats for Labour, and yet the lower than many others are predicting for the Lib Dems, although not by much. It just seemed weird. The second counterintuitive result was this idea that applying tactical voting means the number of seats for the Lib Dems increases, and you go, okay, yeah, and then reduces for Labour, and you go, what? But, the reason is because the model is saying actually Reform UK supporters voting tactically for the Tories outpaces Progressive Party supporters voting tactically for Labour in those seats. And you go, okay, that makes sense. And it also would suggest that the only thing stopping the Tories from being beaten into third place is progressive tactical voting in Labour Conservative contests being outgunned by Reform UK tactical voting. So, that side of it, you can go, okay, I can go along with that. You can absolutely see Reform UK supporters ultimately deciding to vote Conservative tactically. especially for Conservative candidates who are naturally more aligned with them anyway. And Badenoch could be considered one of those candidates. But can we treat this as credible? Well, the MRP sample only has 10,000. Now, that sounds like really large. If you're used to looking at the usual weekly ones, it's like, 1,200 or 2,000. It's like, so 10,000 sounds massive, but it's really low for an MRP poll. They're supposed to like 15 to 20,000. They do say in their methodology they've combined it with other results from other pollsters, beefing it up. And you go, okay, they have been developing this way of doing MRP for a while, but it is MRP on the cheap. They also cite the fact that their general modelling techniques proved themselves in the 2019 election, which is sort of true. There is a reason why people use electoral calculus to carry out rough and ready MRP calculations of normal polls. There are other calculators out there. Electoral calculus has the record. But I would caution a few things. There is a serious potential error I often talk about in many voting intention polls, which hardly gets mentioned: false recall. There are other ways of cocking up this sort of polling as well, but false recall is one that too few pollsters even seem to take seriously. It's people who put down the wrong answer about past voting behaviour in polls. And it's a bigger problem for pollsters who don't take account for it now than it was in 2019. In 2019, if you were asking people how they voted at the last election and they put down the wrong, and you think it's mad to put down the wrong answer, but I cannot stress enough, and YouGov have tested this out, there's a lot of people there who don't always properly remember who they voted for. They think they do, but their mind's playing tricks on them because they weren't that firm about their views when they put their cross in the box. So, which is why the last few days of the campaign are so crucial. There's so many voters just making their minds up on that last day, sometimes on the walk to the polling station, sometimes when they've picked the pencil up. But in 2019, if you asked them how they voted in 2017, it was only 2.5 years earlier. Whereas now it's 4.5 years earlier. So there's much greater chance of false recall being a problem. And there's lots of pollsters who just take no account of it at all, which will mean they're steered further off course. And this latest MRP poll has used multiple pollsters' data, meaning that false recall will be in there to some degree, maybe a large degree. That being said, the methodology for the modelling of the data will be fine, as I've said. But there are two main worries. The first is that the data seems bad. Electoral calculus model, remember, they're not the pollsters. They use other pollsters for the data for their model. So even if their model is fine, and they do have a track record, if their data is bad, so are the results. And looking at the results, there are certainly, should we say, questions about the data. I'm not attacking pollsters here, but there are questions about the data because they seem odd. The second is a more natural limitation to MRP. MRP, if applied correctly, is very good at giving you an indication of how voting intention translates into seats won, because we have this mad first past the post system where it's not at all intuitive. However, it does have weaknesses. First is that it can be messed up. It's actually very difficult. Don't just go, oh, this is an MRP poll, therefore it's as good as every other. Different pollsters apply MRP differently. In 2017, Lord Ashcroft almost killed the concept before it took off with a botched version. YouGov saved it by using the technique differently to produce results which were very accurate when you looked at the actual election results, and that basically was spot on. They also did very well in 2019, but I will say in 2019, the Tories performed at the upper end of YouGov's expectations. So the model didn't work as well it did work for them, but not as well in 2019. Why? Because there was a big change in voting behaviour, which causes problems. And we're now seeing evidence of more flux in voting behaviour for this election. So many more factors now at play, which are going to cause problems for MRP as well as other forms of polling. And that is to say nothing of voter ID. Huge risk, boundary changes, the massive number of MPs stepping down. All of these present potentially very serious pitfalls for pollsters this year. Models work on mapping polling data onto known voting behaviour. People who sort of say this tend to be the same as these other people. If the behaviour changes, the model weakens. Second problem is MRP cannot take account of individual local issues. So things like the qualities of the local candidate or local concerns. So an MRP poll can get the breakdown of seats won broadly correct. So they can, after the election, we may find that actually there'll be one or two pollsters that did pretty well with their model in terms of the number of seats won. But if you dig into it, there'll be individual results that they got badly wrong. And, this is where the Badenoch seat of Essex North West runs into problems. Tactical voting advice cannot come from MRP polls alone. They're really useful. They're a very good source. But they have these weaknesses on an individual constituency basis that you need other sources of information for, like local election voting behaviour, just general local intelligence on certain issues. All the evidence points to the Lib Dems having more chance if you take this poll out of it. Even Electoral Calculus, though, if you go onto Electoral Calculus's website, they're the ones who've done this analysis. If you put your postcode search in and you're in that new constituency of Essex North West, it will tell you the Lib Dems have got a better chance. So for this particular constituency, this MRP poll stands alone in going, oh no, Labour are the obvious choice, when everything else says either we're not sure or the Lib Dems are the better bet. Now, this is not me, by the way, saying, by the way, the Lib Dems are the tactical voting choice. I don't know. What I do know is that this poll, being so confident about it being Labour, not right. And the danger is, and this is the real danger, that one group of tactical voters looks at this poll, for example, and goes, oh, Labour are the tactical voting choice. Right, we'll vote Labour then. Another group of tactical voters looks at something else and goes, oh, it's the Lib Dems that are tactical. We'll vote Lib Dem then. And they split themselves. And Reform UK supporters, they back Badenoch because there's no choice for them. They know who to back. If they're going to vote tactically, they back the Conservatives. They also like her crazy, so probably more of them would do it as well. And Badenoch wins comfortably. And you know what's coming next, don't you? This is why I will recommend stopthetories.vote for those of you who want to use your vote tactically. Not everyone does, I'm not telling you how to vote. But for those who do, or know someone who does, that is what you need to do. The postcode search will be there for early next week. It's not there yet. Remember, the election was sprung on us. People were on holiday. But it will be there, I'm told, early next week. But don't worry about it anyway until you're ready to cast your vote. It doesn't matter what it says now or what it will say when it launches on Sunday, Monday or something. You can't cast your vote now. I will say they did really well in their advice in the past two local elections, very accurate. And local elections are harder to offer advice on than general elections. They also don't just lean on MRP polls. They have other indicators as well and only offer confident advice where it all points to the same conclusion. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe for further content and click the like button. You can also sign up for memberships if you'd like to support the channel further. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.